The woman who prayed for 40 years and witnessed a miracle. What if I told you there was a woman who prayed for 40 years without ever seeing a single sign from God? 40 years of waiting, hoping, crying, and trusting, while the world around her laughed, doubted, and told her to give up. But then, one day, something happened. A miracle, so powerful, so undeniable, that even the skeptics were left speechless. Was it her faith? Was it destiny? Or was it something greater than we can ever understand? This is the incredible, true story of a woman whose unwavering belief changed everything. And by the end of this video, you'll see why no prayer is ever wasted. The woman who never gave up. Her name was Mary Williams. A simple woman with an extraordinary faith. She wasn't a preacher, she wasn't famous, she wasn't rich. She was just an ordinary Christian woman living in a small town with a faith bigger than the tallest mountains. From the time she was a little girl, Mary had always believed that God listens. Her mother taught her to pray every night before bed, saying, "Even if you don't hear an answer, God is always working." And Mary believed it. But she never knew how deeply those words would be tested in her life. Mary's life was simple. She lived in a quiet town, went to church every Sunday, and prayed every morning before sunrise. But one day, her world shattered. Her only son, David, left home at the age of 18. He was angry. He was lost. He had abandoned his faith. "I don't need God anymore," he had said, his voice cold and distant. "Stop wasting your time praying, Mom. I'm never coming back." And just like that, he was gone. No phone calls, no letters, no signs of life, silence. But Mary? She refused to give up. She fell to her knees that night and prayed, "Lord, wherever my son is, bring him back to you." And so began a 40-year battle of faith. The first years of prayer, years 1 to 5. At first, Mary believed she would see an answer quickly. She woke up every morning and prayed, "God, I know you will bring David back. I trust you." She checked the mailbox, hoping for a letter. She sat by the phone, waiting for a call. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months, turned into years. And still, nothing. But Mary refused to stop praying. Even when her friends said, "Mary, it's been years. Maybe he's never coming back." Even when her pastor said, "Sometimes God's answer is no." Even when her own heart whispered, "What if you're praying for something that will never happen?" Mary still woke up every morning, fell to her knees and whispered the same prayer, "Lord, bring my son back to you." The years of doubt and pain, year 620. 10 years passed, nothing. 15 years, silence. By the 20th year, Mary was tired. She was now in her 60s. Her hair had turned gray. Her hands trembled with age. She still prayed every single day, but she couldn't help but wonder, "God, are you even listening?" One night she fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Lord, I've been faithful. I've trusted you. But why? Why haven't you answered me?" For the first time in her life, Mary felt abandoned. And for the first time in 40 years, she considered giving up. But then, something strange happened. Mary sat in her small wooden chair staring at the flickering candle on her table. The room was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses on your heart like a heavy weight. She had spent 20 years praying for her son, 20 years of whispering the same prayer, of crying into her pillow at night, of believing in something she couldn't see. And yet, David was still gone. No letters, no phone calls, no signs of life. A small voice crept into her heart, a voice she had tried to ignore for so long. "Maybe God isn't going to answer you, Mary." She closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. For the first time, doubt clawed at her faith. Had she wasted 2 decades of her life praying for something that would never happen? That night, for the first time, Mary did not pray. She just sat there, staring at the ceiling, feeling empty. But something strange happened. The next morning, as she sat on her porch watching the sunrise, a thought came to her. A thought so clear, so powerful, that it shook her to her core. What if my prayer is the only thing keeping David alive? Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded. She realized something. Even if she never saw the answer, she couldn't stop now. Because maybe, just maybe, her prayers were doing something she couldn't see. And so with a new fire in her soul, Mary dropped to her knees and whispered, "Lord, I will keep praying. Even if I never see it, even if I never understand, I trust you." And with that, she kept going. The final years of prayer, year 26 to 39. Mary had grown older now. Wrinkles lined her face, her steps were slower. But one thing never changed. Every single morning, she still prayed for David. At this point, people had stopped asking her about him. Her friends had long given up hope. Her pastor had once gently told her, "Mary, sometimes we don't get the answers we want." But she just smiled and said, "My God is faithful." Yet deep inside, a part of her ached. She was now 79 years old. She had spent more than half her life praying for a son she hadn't seen since he was 18. Would she die without ever seeing him again? The thought haunted her. But she pushed it away and kept praying. Because faith wasn't about what she saw. It was about what she knew. And she knew her God was listening. The miracle, year 40. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. Mary had just finished her daily prayer when there was a knock on the door. Her heart nearly stopped. Nobody ever visited her this early. She stood up slowly, her hands shaking as she reached for the doorknob. And when she opened it, she gasped. Standing on her doorstep was David, her son, her boy. Tears welled up in her eyes. She blinked, afraid that maybe she was dreaming, but he was real. His face had aged, his eyes looked tired, he had gray streaks in his hair, but it was him. After 40 years, he had come home. Mary tried to speak, but no words came out. Finally, David took a deep breath and said something that made her knees go weak. "Mom, I found God." Mary covered her mouth, tears spilling down her face. "I don't know why, but for the past few months, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I felt like something was pulling me back home." His voice cracked, and then, one night, I prayed. For the first time in 40 years, I prayed. Mary's heart pounded. "And God, He spoke to me, Mom." He wiped his eyes and whispered, "He told me that you never stopped praying for me, and that's why I'm still alive." Mary fell to her knees, weeping. She had waited 40 years for this moment, and now, as she held her son in her arms, she realized God had heard every single prayer. The aftermath, a story of faith that changed lives. From that day on, David never left God again. He became a man of faith, a man of prayer. And the story of his mother, the woman who prayed for 4 decades without ever giving up, spread like wildfire. People who had given up on faith started to believe again. People who thought God wasn't listening began to pray again. Mary became a living testimony that no prayer is ever wasted. Even when she couldn't see the answer, God was working. Even when she doubted, God was faithful. Even when the world told her to stop, she kept going. And because of that, she witnessed a miracle. A message to everyone watching. To anyone watching this, maybe you're praying for something. Maybe you're waiting for a miracle. Maybe you're tired, weary, and wondering if God is even listening. Let Mary's story remind you of this. No prayer is ever wasted. It might take days. It might take months. It might even take 40 years. But God hears every single word. And when the time is right, the miracle will come. So don't give up, because the next prayer you pray could be the one that changes everything.